Welcome to Do What Matters Most. This is episode 10 in the series Parent Leadership for 21st Century Children. The exciting benefits of parent leadership can be seen when parents adapt to the maturing of their children, to individual children, and adapt their family to promote children's development. See how this works for children from birth to 5 years of age. Knowing how children will develop and then matching what you do to help them will provide a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment for you and success for your children. Visit mattersmostmedia.org to find more about the podcast and firstanswers.com to find tons of parenting resources.
In the first part of this series, I described how traditional parenting approaches were measured by how much control parents exerted, how much warmth, and how much teaching or so on that they did. And out of that came several different types. Several years ago, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, the parenting styles were authoritarian, permissive, authoritative, neglectful, and the idea was that being authoritative, that is, parents providing boundaries, give freedom to children to make decisions, and are nurturing and warm, that appears to be the very best kind. And of course, neglectful is not good for some reasons. Permissive is not good for some obvious reasons, and authoritarian means there's way too much control. There's rules are too strict, too much demand for discipline and obedience. These have evolved into 6 types of parenting with sort of a modern day twist. These are free-range parenting, where parents allow independence, supervised from a distance; helicopter parenting, where parents are overprotective and controlling; snowplow parenting, where parents try to fulfill the child's wants and demands and so on, plows down anything in order to give the children what they want; lighthouse parenting, where parents trust children to follow role models, search for balance when loving, protecting, communicating, and so on. Fifth is attachment parenting, where parents are nurturing, have physical closeness, positive discipline, and children, to have a tendency to improve their language skills and emotional skills. And then last, number 6, is tiger parenting, where parents expect obedience and success, sometimes harsh and rigid, but the effects on the children are high achievement, some anxiety, but they're quite self-reliant. I went on to say that researchers have identified 3 dysfunctional parents because in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen families where the children are generally not only not giving or having opportunities, but they are struggling to survive and live. And these 3 that the researchers have identified are called the peripheral rejecting parent, where parents have power, but they stay on the sideline, they don't get involved, and accept when to reject their kids for some activity. Typically, the parents feel in competition with the children, and they just want to make the kids feel less than. A second kind of really, truly harmful parenting is the reactive, emotionally predatory parent, which means that in this case, the parents will offer love and then withhold it. They'll restrict, remove privileges when they give them out. They will do all sorts of scolding and yelling, criticizing, and so on. And that is harmful. And then the third kind the researchers identified is the emotionally distant and aloof parent. And this happens sometimes because parents are very busy. But in this case, the parents have a hard time expressing or feeling emotions. They don't work to get emotional connections with their children. And so the children learn to grow up without that. You might want to read the book, The Adult Children of Alcoholic Parents, which gives a very good description of this type of parent, because people who struggle with addictions like alcohol, they also have emotional problems, and one of which is that they can't let or feel their emotions and then let them be available to their children. So the thesis of the book is that children grow up, and while they don't consume alcohol, they have the same emotional style as their parents. From this point, I propose that what we need for children who are called 21st century children But children who face what our kids do, these societal changes, the trends, things happening to families, we need a form of parental leadership that has these four qualities. One is to learn to adapt, where parents adapt their leadership to match individual children's unique needs. Well, that's not old, but it's really interesting how busy parents today will sort of see the children in kind of a conglomerate way and say all you kids need and so on, and fail to individualize. We need a form of parenting, number two, where parents adapt their leadership to their family and individuals as children mature. Well, that seems to make a common sense too. At least make a lot of sense. Here's the problem. Sometimes when parents get their rules fixed and things are going along well, or things are stable, they say, no, let's not tweak it, let's not do anything. Well, what happens is then the parents and the children are in a situation where the parents are trying to organize a parental system with children who are either too young or too old for it. Number three, we need a parent leadership system where parents can adapt their leadership methods to correct for the bad decisions in the children's social world and community. Our children, whether we like to admit it or not, are under a great deal of threat. And quite often, it doesn't matter where you live. Some families will move to a place where they think is safer, and to some extent, that's true. For example, there are not many gangs in rural Nevada, or there's not many drug traffickers either in the deserts of Arizona. But as it turns out, the bad conditions are in our homes if we have the internet and in people we associate by, and it could be anything or anybody. And that may sound like a negative, very pessimistic view, but while I'm optimistic about opportunities, which you will find, it is true for a lot of parents that they are running into stuff that they never imagined. I have mentioned before that children often encounter pornography and start in their process at age 8 or 9 or 10. And the parents are thinking, well, our kids are just nice kids going to school and having fun. For a lot of kids, that's not true. And then number four is to be able to adapt the family and parental example so that we learn how to better promote children's growth. Now, let me quickly review. Parent leadership needs to adapt to match children's individual unique needs. They need to adapt so that they adjust it according to the age and stage of their children. They need to adapt their leadership so that the parental example and the family life can better promote children's growth. And then they also need to be able to adapt to correct for the bad conditions in the children's social world and community. You might be thinking, oh, gee, that sounds so complicated. I don't know if I could ever apply it. Actually, it's not much more complicated than what we're doing, and quite often it eases the way if you have some idea about how to make these adaptations. So, for example, we're going to divide up these next episodes to focus on children between birth and 5, and then give a focus to children 6 to 11, and then 12 through 18, and then 18 to 23 or 24, so that we have 4 different periods of life. Now, we can't quite call them stages because researchers have not found the same literal stages that humans go through that a lot of animals do. But we can call them periods, critical periods or sensitive periods or something else, so that we get an idea about how they're different from one another, and then that will help us understand how to adapt to them. So suppose that you're researching and you're family scientists and you're gathering information about children in the first period of their lives, birth through 5. And you discover this research that clearly points out that when fathers are in the hospital at the time a child is born and holds the child early, they subsequently spend more time with them, and these children achieve better at school and in social settings. Now, if you had a large number of studies like that, you would start to think, wow, there are some specific things that make a big difference during this period of time, and if I learned them, I could do them, and my children would be of great benefit. This is likely the period of time in a child's life that has most of the research done about it. But the middle childhood years and the adolescent years and the young adult years are catching up because researchers are finding a lot of challenges and are trying to find out why and what to do about them. So it might turn out that what I'm going to describe is true, that in some ways, one of the most important forms of growth in the first 5 years of life for every child is the creation of a secure attachment with his or her parents. Now think about that with me just for a minute before moving on. We're adapting or making adjustments according to the age of the child. We're also doing things and considering what we do in terms of, will it help deal with the threats kids face? Will it help them grow and develop and improve? And is it a good thing to do as they mature? So take a look at this. Secure attachment turns out to be important for all of those. And so during this period of time, that's why parents would make whatever adjustments are necessary to spend time, predictable time, and concern. So we're talking about clear and predictable and nurturing leadership for children between birth and 5 years of age. Now, this is because the trust that comes from this attachment and the mistrust that can result instead can affect a child for many years, and some researchers believe forever. In light of this and other parts of life, we can legitimately ask then what adaptations are necessary for parents to make during the first years of a child's life, birth to 5. You probably have heard about an attachment disorder of some kind, where a child was in an orphanage and not attended to very well, and parents adopted at age 3, and that child does not have an attachment experience with adults and provides some real difficult challenges. Now, quite often, the tumult and instability of the children's lives has its beginning in the busyness and frantic behavior of the parents. While we don't know for certain how much time children need with their parents to be healthy, we do know that a certain amount of involvement, parental leadership, and organization makes the world predictable for kids and leads to more positive emotions. So you have a choice. Not every child will be responsive right away, of course, but if you have children and want them to be calm and positively attached to you, then it's important for you to consider creating a family environment that is clear and predictable. Clear morning routines, predictable evening routines, predictable feeding times, and so on. This does not mean that children are better off when you control everything, regulate everybody, and rigidly relate to the children. It's not that. It just simply means that children find enough that is predictable so they can mentally trust the new world they have entered. Now, there are exceptions, but these usually occur when one or more of the children have some difficulty. Now, inherited physical problems, prolonged illness, mental and emotional delays, cognitive disorder problems, that makes it difficult for children to form these types of attachments. There is an amazingly long list of things parents can do when their children are between birth and 5, and it's not my purpose to catalog all those and present them to you. I just want to make this point. Would you please create a mental set for yourself as a parent? Learn what is healthy growth so you can see your children's future, anticipate it, understand when it is not positive, so if necessary, you can feel confidence and be competent in helping them. Number 2, organize your family to give them opportunities to grow so you feel capable, you have resources to achieve what you want for your children. We're talking about food and clothing, of course, but we're also talking about things you teach them and experiences they have with the siblings or with parents in your family. And then number 3 is part of your mental set. Lovingly implement parental practices that will reduce your frustration and anxiety and create children's willingness to follow your leadership. Now, this lesson is focused on an application of parental leadership so that you can see a combination of things you can put together for children this age. Generally speaking, it should be clear, predictable, and nurturing. But now let's get to the practice of rearing children. I'm going to provide a summary of the healthy development milestones so you will know the forms of development children can and should make part of their healthy growth. These, along with other forms of growth children make during this period of life, will give you a way to measure what is happening to your children and help provide the basis for what you do as a parent. I want to insert here that we typically will take pictures every fall, let's say, and say to our children, wow, look how the changes have been from last year to this year. This is not about that. It's about understanding enough about human growth and development so that you understand what could and should be going on during a certain period of a child's life. This will allow you then to measure, understand why and how things occur. And then you can say, okay, this should be happening or not. Now, why is it that most parents will say they get better after the first child or the second child if they have more children than two? It's because the first two taught them about these developmental milestones, and they know what's to come, they know how to participate and how to help their kids. So we're especially grateful for the oldest child, and we're also grateful for the next child because through their lives, they actually teach us a little bit better about how to take care of the rest of the kids. Now, let me just tell you again about the idea of development, what development means. It means change and growth over time. You would acknowledge that children change and grow over time, and would you acknowledge that families do, and that children and our parents do as well? Well, it happens. So what are some milestones that would occur during this period of time? Toilet training, of course. They demonstrate wellness of good health. They can name body parts and understand what each part does. They have, if they're 5 years of age, they have a positive body image. If they display rhythm and coordination, that's good. If they can succeed at small motor skills like tying shoelaces, coloring, drawing, printing, jumping, and so on. If they have accurate gender information and feel confident about their gender. And then they're also competent at large motor skills like crawling, walking, running, jumping, and throwing. Now see, that's not so tough. You get those things in mind and it will tell you what your children are doing during this period of time, whether or not the time that they're doing it turns out to be important, or whether they're not doing it and need some additional help. Now let's go on to mental development. Mental development, these things should be happening. Language development, which includes multi-word sentences and correct pronunciation. They use all 5 senses to learn. They show the ability to reason, remember, and form plans to solve problems. They have strategies of working with objects and people like organizing toys and games. They're active in what is called experiential learning. They like to be involved and active. And they show creative intelligence by inventing stories, games, and dramatic performances. Well, that's not so tough either. See, here are a few things that you look at those and you can say, all right, my child's doing all of these. I'm feeling pretty good. Now, what about social development? Well, social development here's how they demonstrate that. They're an active participant in social games with parents and other children. They can move from solitary to cooperative plays with peers. They can display patterns of cooperation, that is taking turns. They can successfully adapt emotions, language, and social behavior to several situations. They can adjust to going to the grocery store or to church or whatever. They can participate in conversation skills, talking, listening, humor, and so on. And they show awareness of themselves as unique individuals. They have their own thoughts and feelings. In other words, they can say, well, I am me. I am a person, and I recognize that. Now, what about emotional development? It's easy too. They can display a variety of positive emotions. These are the normal, healthy things: love, affection, cheerfulness, and so on. They can regulate some emotional behavior by reducing extreme displays and control anger and frustration. They can sometimes change a negative to a positive emotion. They can talk about emotions. I'm sad. They can accurately recognize other people's emotions. 5 things. It helps us understand what they're doing. And now, how about moral development? They can understand rule govern behavior. They know in situations there are rules. They can show and feel empathy for others. They learn what helps and harms people. They can understand concepts of right or wrong and good and bad. and they know that actions have consequences. I have already presented to you the 10 parent practices that have the greatest impact on children, and the impact is that may motivate children to follow. I'm going to repeat them here very briefly and say these are the ways you implement them during this period of a child's life. Number 1, make observing and gathering information about children an ongoing activity. Identify these developmental tasks and see how they're doing. Number 2, develop the habit of identifying positive alternative behavior to children's negative behavior and focus more on that. What that means is, if a child is dishonest, teach them what honesty is and focus on that. If they quarrel, teach them how to cooperate. Number 3, express many displays of love and kindness and gratitude toward your children, and ask others to do the same. Do not let other adults tease your children too much. Don't let them fool them and say things to them that scare them. Just help them be reasonable and healthy. Number 4, prepare your children. Teach them more than you punish them. When they make a mistake, teach them something new. 5, communicate more than you control. Build conversation relationships with them. Encourage more than you criticize. You can do this. Things will work out. I'm confident you can make this happen. Involve and individualize your children. Get them together with the family for family activities, and then focus on them as individuals. And this is how you are, and this is what you're like, and so on. 8, talk, comfort, and resolve more than you isolate. Please don't send your children off to the room when they make a mistake and leave them there. Bring them back, talk and comfort them, and resolve the issue by coming up with a solution. 9, set firm and flexible limits and spend time teaching and enforcing them. Every healthy person has limits. They limit time, they limit the expense of money, they limit their emotions and so on. And 10, learn to build your children from inside out, not outside in. Place your wisdom in their inward parts and write it in their hearts by asking them, what do you think about this? How do you feel about that? Well, I am sad too. And you teach them about these inner qualities so that children can learn about themselves in this manner. So now I am beginning to put this parent leadership plan or model into the application stage. Learn about the developmental tasks of children for their age. 2, implement the 10 impact parent practices, and then learn how to make adaptations to your children, the 4 that I mentioned, individual children, to the threats they face, to their growth and development, and then you make adjustments in terms of helping them learn in your family. All of this is designed to promote healthy children, to start off knowing how to promote healthy children rather than them letting them grow up without all the things that you can give them. It's called clear and predictable and nurturing parenting.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Do What Matters Most, which is sponsored by firstanswers.com, where you can find new tools for families and parents of 21st century kids with a focus on emotional self-reliance. Visit firstanswers.com to sign up for a free newsletter. Find Do What Matters Most on Facebook and our website, mattersmostmedia.org, where you can ask Dr. Scoresby your own questions. Remember to subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes. Give us a rating and write a review on the podcast app or Google Podcasts, and let us know what you think about Do What Matters Most. In an effort to promote good things for families, visit inevitableobjects.com, an online art gallery featuring a curated, thoughtful, and beautiful selection of original, one-of-a-kind artworks for your home. Inevitable Objects is currently featuring an exhibition of abstract paintings by Adam Bateman, exploring the relationship between mankind and the land in the American West.